What's going on, everyone? The Draft Nerd here. If you're new to the channel, I make NBA draft / college basketball content, so if that interests you, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. Last episode, last video, I did a video asking if the Arkansas Razorbacks are the most talented team in college basketball, and that video was insane. The Razorback community really came and supported that video, and it went crazy. So thank you all for subscribing. When I made that video, I had 11 subscribers, and at the time of recording this video, I have 115. So thank you all so much for watching. But anyway, if you cannot tell by the thumbnail title in this video, we're going to be talking about my favorite team, the University of North Carolina, and the Tar Heels are currently the AP preseason #1 team, and basically we're going to talk about did they deserve it, and kind of like my thoughts on if they can keep it. And obviously, like, we know how college basketball goes. They may they may not keep the #1 spot, but is this team good enough to go all the way? And that's what we're going to talk about in this video. So let's go ahead and get into it. So my favorite team, I've been a fan of this team my whole life. My dad went there. I'm from North Carolina, so it all makes sense. But I think this is a very talented team in college basketball. There's a lot of one and dones, and I think, hopefully with the rule change where you can just come straight out of high school, I think starting in 2024, maybe it will allow a lot more teams to bring back a lot of players and have some success, because when you go through a one and done situation, when you have a bunch of freshmen on your team, it's very difficult to win. Like, look at Kentucky. Most of those guys go on to be great NBA players, and usually they're all on the same team in Kentucky. However, they're all freshmen. So one thing about North Carolina is that they're really good at bringing back talent, and this might be one of the more talented teams that they've brought back in a while. I mean, granted, there was a team in 2017 that was a pretty talented team with Joel Berry and all them guys, but I think this team, I don't know, something about this team I think is very talented. Now, it's very top heavy, and that is something that we saw last year during the tournament run. We saw those guys get tired, to be honest. I mean, Kansas, outstanding, shout out to Kansas, but you could tell that this team was exhausted. And there's a difference between playing when you're the underdog and then now playing, you're expected to win all these games. And that's one thing I'm going to be looking out for, is that how does this team handle the pressure of being #1? How do they handle being the top team? The margin of error is a lot smaller now, and so what you want to do is basically put your foot on the gas. However, you have to make sure your guys, like the Caleb Loves, the Armando Bacot, you have to make sure they're ready, willing, and able to finish out the season. Now, how do you do that? You got to have a bench to be able to play these games that aren't even ACC games or the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Like, those are the type of games where your bench is really going to have to come through, because do you really want to play Armando Bacot 40 minutes, 38 minutes like they were having to do in the tournament? No, you don't want that, especially if more than likely that's what's going to happen in the tournament, but you want them to be ready. However, last year they had to get through all the games by playing everybody 40 minutes basically. So let's go ahead and look into the roster and kind of break it down. If you see me looking at my monitor, it's just I'm trying to look at my notes and make sure I give you all the right information. But basically what we're going to do is first we're going to talk about the starters, of course. So for the starters, I have Caleb Love, RJ Davis. So with these guys, I mean, you really could switch them either way. I feel as though RJ Davis is more of a shooting guard. However, you could say Caleb Love is more of a shooting guard because he's, more of the shot maker and he takes more shots. But I think it's more so RJ Davis. But really, it doesn't matter. Basketball is becoming positionless. Now it's becoming like guards, wings, big. So it is what it is. And then you're going to have Leaky Black, who is a vital part of this team. Leaky Black is so vital to this team just because of what he does on defense, and a lot of stuff he does just doesn't show up on the stat sheet. And every team needs someone like this, no matter what level, high school, college, NBA. Everybody needs a guy like Leaky Black to really just get down and do a lot of the dirty work. And RJ Davis actually at the guard position and does some of that stuff too. He does some stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet. However, it's not to the way that Leaky Black does. Now, next, the transfer. Pete Nance. Pete Nance is going to be filling in for Brady Manning. Now, is that easy? I don't think so. I mean, we'll talk about it later because I'm going to have like a slide or whatever you want to call it about departures, but it's not going to be easy to replace what Brady Manning does. What made North Carolina so dangerous is that they did have a guy to be able to stretch the floor at a high rate. There were times where no one could score and Brady Manning would just go crazy. All of a sudden he would hit like 3 threes in a row. So will Pete Nance be the one to do that? And the thing is, it's the fact that Brady Manning hit 3 threes in a row. It doesn't have to necessarily be Pete Nance. So if Caleb Love has evolved his game, or RJ Davis has evolved his game, they can be the ones to do it too. It doesn't necessarily have to be Pete Nance. But I'm just saying, from that position last year, that's what the North Carolina Tar Heels were getting. Lastly, Player of the Year, probably. I think he's preseason Player of the Year. Armando Bacot. I don't know. I love Armando Bacot. He's the kind of players, one of the players I like to root for. If you didn't know, which I don't know why you would, surprisingly enough, Dennis Rodman is one of my favorite players, if not my favorite player ever. And that's just because of the hard work he put in on the floor, and just like how he just seemed like so locked into the game when he was playing. I know there's off the court stuff, but that's what I feel like with Armando Bacot, and not literally just because of the rebound numbers, but just because he fights for every rebound. He fights for positioning down in the paint. He is a down and dirty player. It's just, limited to the paint. But he dominates the paint. And in college basketball, you dominate the paint, you can dominate the game easily. Now, even in the NBA, you get someone dominant enough in the paint, that's the game. Like, look at Nikola Jokic, look at Joel Embiid, Giannis Antetokounmpo. These guys where, even though the NBA is not, paint centric, it's very perimeter centric, if you can dominate the paint, you can really move the needle, especially in college basketball. And I just don't see a team being able to match up with Armando Bacot and prevent him from doing what he does, because he doesn't have to get 20 points. He doesn't have to get 15 points. He can easily get a 10 and 15 game, and it's going to be hard to keep him off the board. So I think that is something that they're really going to need to have to rely on in order to continue to being this, number one team. All right, so now we have the rotational players. So rotational players, and these are kind of guys that are mainly from last year's team. And these are guys that I feel like get a lot of minutes, but these are guys we're going to see a lot more of during the regular season. So they may have played in every game last season, but it doesn't mean they played a lot of minutes. But these are guys who, coming back this year, you expect to see more minutes from them, and you just expect them to play a bigger part, which I know they will. So we have guys like Puff Johnson, Dontrez Styles, and Justin McCoy. So Puff Johnson I like how he plays. He plays hard. He doesn't play anything like Cam Johnson, but he can, stretch the floor a little bit. He's just a guy, once again, he's almost like a Leaky Black, where he doesn't do everything that Leaky Black does, but he's just a guy that not everything he does shows up on the stat sheet. Always need one of those guys, especially coming off your bench as well as in your starting lineup. Next, we have Dontrez Styles. Dontrez Styles is a guy who I feel as though, I wouldn't say be able to put the pressure on teams when RJ Davis is out and Caleb Love is out, but he's just a guy who can, kind of keep tempo and just, he can hold down that guard position while those two guys are out. And that's going to be the biggest thing, is just because of the fact that a lot of your wisdom, a lot of your just perimeter play comes from two guys. So it is going to be a lot of pressure, for sure, but it's just going to be a lot to ask Dontrez Styles to come off the bench and kind of be able to at least hold his own until one of those guys can get back. And then Justin McCoy. Justin McCoy is going to be important just because of the fact that forward position with Pete Nance is going to be vital, just because of the fact that last year you knew Brady Manning was going to come in and he was going to own that position. I think Pete Nance can do it in his own way. However, you do have to just keep that position strong, and that's because that's not the core, if that makes any sense. So the core obviously is Caleb Love, RJ Davis, Leaky Black, Armando Bacot. You don't have anybody to you don't have anybody returning from that position. So I think that other forward position where Pete Nance plays, I think is just going to be an important position to hold down and kind of rotate guys through. And that's where Justin McCoy comes from, who is a guy who was on the team last year. So I think that's important that you're bringing someone off the bench who has been here before, so I think that's just going to be a valuable piece, and hopefully he lives up to expectations. For departures, we have Brady Manning, Dawson Garcia, and Kerwin Walton, and Anthony Harris. So, the main one is Brady Manning. And if you're a North Carolina Tar Heel fan, you know what Brady Manning brings to the table, or at least brought to the table. He was a guy who could really stretch the floor on a team like this, where you almost could play 4 out, 1 in, with him being on the floor, even though, you know, Leaky Black wasn't, you know, the best perimeter shooter, but I mean, he still kept people honest, and you were able to do that. You're kind of able to do that with Pete Nance, but not to the same extent. So that's really going to hurt this team, and I want to see how Hubert Davis kind of adjusts, because your first season, to have a guy who could stretch the floor at the rate that Brady Manning was able to, that's very special, and it's going to be hard to plan around that. So I like to see what they do to fill that void. I've talked about guys who can come off the bench for everybody else but Armando Bacot. Well, that's where this gets addressed. So the key additions they've brought in were Seth Trimble, who is a freshman. They brought in Pete Nance on the transfer, who, I mean, he's a starter. We've already talked about him. Then they brought in Tyler Nickel, who's also a freshman, like a freshman forward. And then they brought in Jalen Washington, who is coming off an injury, so I don't know exactly how ready he'll be for the season. I mean, it's, everything I've heard seems to be like good news, but I'm not 100% sure. But all these guys can prove to be valuable coming off the bench. Seth Trimble's a guard who I feel as though he can really come straight in and make some noise, even though we really don't hear that from freshmen. I mean, any of these guys, like I said, Tyler Nickel, Jalen Washington, they are going to be depth pieces. This is where they're going to shine, in my opinion. I think they're going to shine in situations where, hey, we're playing Georgia Tech on a random Tuesday. Let's go ahead and, you know, let Chef Trimble get a lot of minutes. We're playing Syracuse on a random Thursday. All right. Well, Jalen Washington, we're going to play Armando Bacot 25 minutes. Can you take up the other 15? You know, so these are situations where these guys are really going to have to show, and I think they will. I mean, these are like the deeper bench pieces. They're not the Puff Johnsons of the world and things like that, but they're just going to be just as valuable, like I've been talking about this whole video. Overall, I think this team can do it. I think this team can make their way back to the national championship. We've seen a North Carolina team do that not too long ago, like what, 5 years ago, 6 years ago now. But anyway, I think they can do it. It's going to be rough for sure. It's not going to be easy, but I think they manage themselves well during the regular season. They're able to step up because, like I said, teams are going to give it their all going against this team. If they do all that, I think they can really go back. I mean, I see a few teams being able to beat them. I mean, you always have to worry about Gonzaga. You have to always worry about, I wouldn't really worry about Duke. But then you got like Houston, Arkansas, as I mentioned, a super talented team, a deep team. You got a lot of teams that can really like push the needle. Can Kansas come back? I mean, it's going to be tough. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. Kentucky has someone coming back, but I think he's dealing with the player of the year from last year. I think he's dealing with a foot injury, so we'll see about that. But there's a lot of teams that could do it, but North Carolina, it sticks out. To be honest, North Carolina, when you look at a landscape of college basketball, North Carolina really sticks out. So I think they can bring it back, and I hope they bring it back. But like I said, I mean, anything can happen. Anything can happen in a tournament. North Carolina is known to, kind of fumble at the same time. But if these guys come in motivated, that's going to be another thing. They got to find motivation. You guys made it all the way. This is what everybody came back for, is to come back and win. So we'll see. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'm hopefully cut this video down because I'm looking at the time I recorded and it's a really long video. So hopefully I cut this down. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all guys next time. And let me know some teams or some players. I do draft profiles on this channel as well, talking about the NBA draft. So let me know some players I need to talk about, and let me know some teams I need to talk about, or topics y'all just want to hear. Do y'all want to hear previews of the conferences? I know the college basketball season starts like November 7th, but I mean, one game in, and I'm still doing a preview of conference. It's not going to kill anybody. So let me know if that's what you want to see. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.